Okay, I'm Katherine Odell, and I did my project on ghost crabs and their eating habits. My background is the human presence on beaches around the world has increased, and this increase causes animals that live on the shoreline to gain access to foods that don't occur naturally. Recently, we celebrated the 4th of July, and when I was out there working on my project, you could see evidence from where people had been out there. There were cans and food and wrappers left. And my question was, would the Atlantic ghost crabs, which are the crabs that people go out on the beach and hunt at night when they're on vacation, would they take advantage of foods that are left behind by humans? And I wondered if they would prefer to eat like human foods over the foods that they normally eat. And they usually eat detritus, which is dead organic matter. And I wondered if it would attract predators that would affect either the ghost crabs or other species that live on the shoreline. So my hypothesis was that the ghost crabs that inhabit the Dolphin Island Sea Lab Beach would prefer to eat a dead cigar minnow over a hot dog. So the materials I used were 2 stakes, which I used in the sand to mark my spot so that I would be consistent with where I measured the crabs. I used dead cigar minnows, which we actually caught on our vessel trip to Southwest Rock the first week or the second week. And they were frozen, and then I had to thaw them. And then I used Bar S hot dogs, which Jenny gratefully picked up for me. They were the cheapest ones. I used a transect line to measure I placed the 2 stakes a meter apart, as you can see in that picture. And we didn't have a meter stick, so I just used a transect line. And then, of course, they only come out at night because they're nocturnal. So I had to use a flashlight to be able to see. And then I had my watch because I had to time how long I was out there. Okay, so my procedure. I conducted 3 identical trials. Unfortunately, they weren't consecutive because they got interrupted by the 4th of July because we went to the beach that night. Each night, I went out there and I set up the foods out next to each steak, and then we had to have something to sit on, and I usually had 2 other people with me. And so we would kind of set up where we were going to be, and then we had to sit there for 15 minutes and be completely silent because I was trying to give the ghost crabs a chance to kind of relax because we just kind of stomped across the beach and scared them all back into their burrows. So that was kind of, yeah. My observation interval was 5 minutes. I used my flashlight, and every 5 minutes I would shine the light on each food and count the number of crabs that were on them. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, I usually started at 8:30, and so after the 15-minute period of sitting there for the crabs to come out, I usually started around 8:45. I placed the hot dog and the fish 1 meter apart so that they weren't too close and the scent of them didn't interfere with each other. And I actually dipped them in salt water to get the scent of the ocean on them so that it didn't really smell like the refrigerator or anything. Okay, this is my table with all my data on it. It's kind of overwhelming, but I listed the time over there, and then I counted each time for each trial the number of crabs that were at each food, and then I totaled them at the bottom. So the first trial wasn't as successful as the other 2 because I actually didn't sit there for 15 minutes the first time because I didn't really know what I was doing. So the second time and the third time were definitely more successful in that we saw more crabs to count. And then I consolidated that data into this graph to get the average number of crabs at each food during each trial. And the cigar minnow was consistently the favorite of these ghost crabs. They don't really like the hot dog. The importance of my project is, you wouldn't think it would be much, but it can actually be kind of overreaching because a lot of people are always concerned about the human footprint and what we do to affect the world around us. And in this case, the human footprint could actually be beneficial because if we leave foods behind, not necessarily trash, but foods for animals that inhabit shorelines around the world to eat, that they could adapt and use these. Like they could adapt to be able to eat them, and then they would be able to eat more things. Therefore, it would cause them to be more successful. Um, these foods that are left could attract predators, some that could be invasive and harm species that inhabit shorelines, and others that could help control populations of animals that get too big, and otherwise they could hurt animals such as ghost crabs and other small animals that inhabit the shoreline. Okay, so my conclusion was that my data did support my original hypothesis, and it was logical because they eat dead stuff most of the time. They feed on anything from dead organic matter, turtle hatchlings, each other, and they can actually do this really cool thing called deposit feed, where they use their mouth parts to scoop up sand in their mouth, and they will suck the algae out of the sand that's in between the grains and get the nutrients from it. And they're really successful creatures because they can eat so many different foods, so there's never nothing there for them to eat. And they can actually also endure long periods of time without food, so it takes a long time for them to starve. That's a picture of me placing out the food, and then that's a picture showing how far away the stakes were from the beach. They're kind of hard to see. They're right there. I'd like to thank Jenny for being my mentor, because when I went to her, I didn't actually have a project. I just told her I wanted to work with crabs. I'd like to thank the Dolphin Island Sea Lab. I've had a wonderful experience here. I'd like to thank my roommate, Emery, because she had to go to the beach with me every night and sit there. And a lot of times we had to study while we were out there. And Bonnie and Marty, because they both accompanied me to the beach multiple times. Are there any questions? Wait, what? I can't hear you. Yes. He asked what my thoughts were on animals becoming too dependent on humans for food, and that could definitely be an issue. And I don't think it would be very good because, I mean, in this case, I don't think it would really happen with these crabs because they're able to eat so many different things, and they didn't really like the hot dog, but it could produce that in other species. Um, I think they molt, but I'm not positive. I don't really know the answer to that. Gracie? That was actually Jenny's idea because I was originally going to work with different types of fish, and we weren't really sure if we would see like a difference or a measurable number between that. And so she suggested I use hot dogs because people grill out on the beach, so they might already have been exposed to them. Greg? um, Greg actually said that he has heard of a study where a girl used ghost crabs and found out that they actually like dog poop better than dead fish or hot dogs. So better than cut meat. Jennifer? That's a good question because the first time I went out there, we actually had to move the spot several times because when they come out at night, they're not up in the sand where their burrows are. They're down in the water line because they have to wet their gills and feed. And so we started kind of back up on the sandy part of the beach where most people put their stuff. And then we ended up having to move right where the water would hit so that we were near the crabs. But I didn't look for burrows. Is that it?